Danger ahead. That's the headline from a recent CNBC report on America's economy under Joe Biden. And that's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And quickly, before I get into today's discussion, I want to mention that if you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app. That is the online platform for faith-based podcasts. Or, of course, you can get Bold and Blunt at Washington Times and wherever you get your fine podcasts. Danger ahead. The U.S. economy has yet to face its biggest recession challenge, according to this report in CNBC. And it was just written. It's not like this was written a year ago. This was August 19th, 2022. Here are the bullet points. There is no historical precedent to indicate that an economy in recession can produce 528,000 jobs in a month, as the United States did during July. But that doesn't mean there isn't a recession ahead. And ironically enough, it is the labor market's phenomenal resiliency that could pose the biggest danger. And one final bullet point, the Federal Reserve's rate tightening to address inflation poses a recession threat into 2023. So if you're an average American not schooled in economics and not really interested in the ins and outs of why prices fluctuate this way and wages fluctuate that way, the big takeaway here is Joe Biden's economy isn't working. Joe Biden's economy is causing a lot of heartache and struggle for the average American citizen. Outside the Beltway, where they talk about the economy in terms of theory, as if they're discussing a term paper and how best to provide the necessary bullet points that their professor needs in order to give an A for the term paper. Well, the real fact is Americans don't live by theory. They live in the real world. And so when you go to the gas pumps and fill up your tank, and you recall that just a year ago it was taking, say, $40 to fill your tank, and now it's $70, $75, even when you downgrade to the lower premiums, that's something real. That moves it out of the world of paper policy into real pocketbook heartache and hurt. And this is how Joe Biden's economy has been chugging along for a while now. And just because the White House tells us that we're crazy, there's nothing to see here, that inflation and rising prices and falling wages really aren't that big a concern when you put them in perspective, as Joe Biden just said. Well, we're not buying it. We're not buying it because we're not feeling it. And we're not feeling it because when we have to go and pay the bills and we find less money in the bank account, well, Joe Biden's promises and talk about nothing to see here, folks, go home type of economy, it just doesn't resonate as truthful.
Mr. President, as you know, last Tuesday, the annual inflation rate came in at 8.3%. The stock market nosedived. People are shocked by their grocery bills. What can you do better and faster?
Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective. Inflation rate month to month was just an inch, hardly at all.
You're not arguing that 8.3 is good news.
No, I'm not saying it is good news, but it was 8.2 or 8.2 before. I mean, it's not. Maybe I can make it sound like all of a sudden, my God, it went to 8.2%. It's
the highest inflation rate, Mr. President, in 40 years.
I got that, but guess what we are? We're in a position where for the last several months it hasn't spiked. It is just it's been basically even.
So he's basically admitting that the inflation rate has been high forever under him, and just because it hasn't gone up even higher, that he's doing a good job. Unbelievable. This, of course, was the interview that Joe Biden just gave with Scott Pelley of CBS News on 60 Minutes.
And look down the road. We have massive investments being made in computer chips and employment. So, look, this is a process. This is a process.
Is the economy going to get worse before it gets better?
No, I don't think so. We hope we can have it, they say.
No, I don't think so. Well, we hope not. Well, that's comforting, isn't it? That's exactly what you want your president to say. Well, we hope not. We don't think so. After saying no. That's not just tone deaf. That's feckless. That's just throwing in the white towel and hoping that there is some knight out there in shining armor who can come in and save this White House in time for midterm elections. Because that's the big concern here with Joe Biden's White House and the Democrat Party. They're not concerned about inflation and the economy for Americans' sake. They're concerned about inflation and the economy for political sake, for their own selfish political ambitions. They only want the economy chugging along for the good of American citizens when an election is on the horizon. The proof of that? Well, Biden says he has a plan to bring back manufacturing to America, to reignite manufacturing. And he talks about job creation, that his government has created 10 million jobs. First off, government doesn't create jobs. That is a function of the free market. Second off, PolitiFact already found that Joe Biden's claim of his administration creating 10 million jobs was mostly false. And thirdly, when Joe Biden talks about manufacturing in America and he talks about his Chips and Science Act that he just passed to build electric vehicles and fiber optics and computer chips and so forth on domestic grounds instead of buying these products overseas, what he is ultimately doing is creating new markets for China. Because just because America may manufacture these items doesn't mean America has the rare earth elements to produce these items. We have to buy the stuff that goes into making most of these environmental products from China. China is the one that owns most of these rare earth elements or controls the sale and mining of most of these elements that are needed to produce electric vehicles and so forth. Even when Biden's talking about building jobs in America, he's really benefiting China. And once again, let's just circle back to this CNBC headline from August 2022. Danger ahead. The U.S. economy has yet to face its biggest recession challenge. Well, that certainly doesn't bode well for America. Donald Trump's high inflation rate for his 4 years in office was 2.4%. That was as high as inflation grew under Donald Trump. Biden's high, comparatively speaking, or as Biden would say, to put things into perspective, 9.1% from June. And for the better part of Joe Biden's administration, the inflation rate has been much higher than Trump's high of 2.4%. The takeaway here? Even when Biden's winning, he's still losing. He's still losing to Trump. That's why the Democrats want to distract Americans with things like the January 6th Commission. And that's why Democrats want to constantly attack Donald Trump, who is a private citizen. He's not in office. And why Democrats want to go after all the Trump supporters they can, the MAGA types in America, issuing 40 subpoenas here, 40 subpoenas there, pulling cell phones from Donald Trump, former associates here, cell phones there, handcuffing former Trump associates and staffers whenever and wherever they can. That's why they want to distract from the realities of Joe Biden's so-called wins, because his wins are still losses. And they're hoping, against all hope, that if they distract long enough and loud enough, that the American people will either stay home from voting, or they'll go to the polls and just vote Democrat, because they will have all that dastardly, deplorable Trump narrative ringing about their heads, confusing them and forcing them to think that, oh, Democrats are the ones that save America. Republicans are racist and misogynist and corrupt and so forth. Well, I got to say, the American people aren't that dumb. The Democrat Party may be filled with voters who are that dumb, but the American people in general are not that dumb. And my guest today, Peter Navarro, former assistant to Donald Trump during Trump's administration, is banking on that truth too, the intelligence of the American voters to see past the lies and deceptions of the Joe Biden administration and not only vote for a red wave in November, but also to bring back Donald Trump to the White House in 2024. And he talks about this issue in his new book, Taking Back Trump's America, Why We Lost the White House and How We'll Win It Back. Let's hope that is prophetic. Peter Navarro, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Great to be with you, Cheryl. And this time that we're in is a very, very difficult time. So I'm really happy to be able to talk about this new book I've got, Taking Back Trump's America. For me, Carol, it's not just a book, it's a mission. If we don't take back Trump's America at the ballot box starting in November, we are going to have a country which is not going to function economically, politically, and also be vulnerable to foreign attack.
I'm going to agree with you, Peter, except I'm going to define Trump's America as not just about Trump, but it's what he represented, the spirit of America, the spirit of individual God-given liberties. And I'm sure that's what you mean as well, right?
Yes, and one of the, I think, contributions of the Taking Back Trump's America book is to explain very clearly what Trumpism is within the context of populist economic nationalism. There's a good part of the book that talks about the difference between the rhino wing of the Republican Party and the Trump Republicans. And you can think about it in terms of two different triangles. It's like the Trump Republicans and rhinos agree, certainly, on a lower tax burden, the middle class, a lower regulatory burden for small businesses, and first and foremost in this stagflationary environment, strategic energy dominance that'll keep our gas prices down. We agree on that, okay? The divergence between the rhinos and the Trump Republicans happen in the other triangle. I call it the Iron MAGA triangle. It's the end to endless wars that Bush and Cheney and that wing of the Republican Party foisted on the American people. Trump Republicans don't like that. It's security in our southern borders where there's an invasion now. Trump Republicans don't like that. And first and foremost for me, I was the tip of the spear on this in the White House, it's basically bringing home our manufacturing base and supply chains through enlightened policies like Buy American, Hire American, and trade and tariff policies. And just, you know, the people you're talking about Trump Republicans, it goes far beyond Donald Trump. He was the expression
yes.
of this, and what it means is prosperity for the middle class and security as a nation, and that's what we stand for. Contrary to the Joe Biden blood red speech, and I think when people read Taking Back Trump's America, they'll really understand a lot better how Donald Trump was the vessel and expression of that during his first term, and can be again.
What's your beef with the Freedom Caucus?
The Freedom Caucus is a group of libertarians, which I have no beef with. I've got a libertarian strain in and of myself, but as a practical matter, you had two members of the Freedom Caucus in the White House who were continually in my face when I tried to implement Trump policies. I'm talking about two of the chiefs of staff, Mick Mulvaney and Mark Meadows. And Mulvaney was also, importantly, the OMB director. And the problem I had with these guys, as libertarians, they did not support two of the most important elements of Trump policy. One, Trump always called them his two most simple rules: buy American, hire American. I used to fight with Mulvaney all the time. There's a great chapter in the Taking Back Trump's America book about my first showdown with him in 2017 in his office, where there was a big group of people fighting over the Jones Act. And it was an epiphany. It's like, what? Mulvaney, you don't support the two most important rules of the president you're putatively serving? That's wrong. And then when he was chief of staff and when Meadows was chief of staff, they were continually opposing both the tariff policies of President Trump and Buy American, Hire American. That's my problem with the Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus stands for a lot of good things, but when it came to the transformational elements of the Trump agenda, it was that dog just wouldn't hunt. I remember, the boss sent me over. He loved what was called the Reciprocal Trade Act. There was a piece of legislation he highlighted in his State of the Union speech. And I helped him write it. We were trying to get it passed on the Congress, get sponsors for it. And all it said was, hey, if a foreign country is imposing tariffs that are higher than ours on us, they either have to lower them or we're going to raise ours to theirs. I mean, it's common sense.
Right.
And one of the persons that I tried to get to endorse that, who refused, was none other than Mark Meadows when he was still on the Hill before he migrated over to the White House. I was stunned. It's like, what? So that's my beef with those folks. They had no business being in the White House. They did a crappy job. Mulvaney was a failure and almost got the president impeached as the acting chief of staff. I document this all in the book. And Mark Meadows, as likable he is, was feckless.
So let's get to the subtitles of your book, because that's very interesting to me. Why we lost the White House and how we'll win it back. First off, how do you see the White House was lost? And even more interesting, do you see an actual path for Donald Trump to come back and win the White House in 2024?
Well, let me start with that first. The actual path for him to win the White House in 2024 is to first win the Congress in 2022.
Right.
And why is that important? It's like in the Taking Back Trump's America book, I talk about how in 2018, bad personnel within the West Wing convinced the boss to focus too much of his energy on the Senate races rather than the House, and we let the gavel slip away to Nancy Pelosi, and she would, for the next 2 years leading into the election, abuse the investigatory powers of Congress to basically throw mud at the president and try every way she could to preemptively take him out of office, along with Raskin and Schiff and Luria and Lofgren and all of those scoundrels. And if we allow her to hold on to that gavel in 23 and 24, she'll do the same damn thing again. And make no mistake about it, they want to take President Trump not only down, Pelosi, by her own words, wants to put him in prison. Okay? That's who those people are. So you have to start that. With respect to how we lost the White House, I want to be clear here. In the first chapter, I say that, look, there was a number of strategic failures, not by President Trump himself, but by the bad personnel who served him, that made that election close enough to steal, and the Democrats did. That election could and should have been a landslide. So I talk about some of those strategic failures. You know, we weren't as tough on China as we could and should have been. That's a big one. And, of course, Jared Kushner's complete bungling of the presidential race itself, including burning money too early in the campaign, like, as I say in the Taking Back Trump's America book, like monkeys with flamethrowers. So I think, look, it's important to understand what went wrong because, as I say at the very beginning of the book, it's the Santayana thing. If you don't remember the mistakes of the past, you're condemned to repeat them. I do not want, as Shakespeare said, past the B prologue. I want a second Trump term to be as successful as befits that man. Because as good a president as he was the first time around, we left some things on the table that ultimately impacted the outcome of that election.
Now, do you think Trump, looking at a second term, do you think that he would be smarter about the people that he chose to surround him in the White House this time? Because when he first came into office, he was new at politics, and so you can forgive that, of course.
Well, the original sin of the administration, as I described in the Taking Back Trump's America book, was committed literally the day after the election, when on November 9th, in came the Rhino wing of the Republican National Committee, and that the sin was to bring that wing in under the Big Tent with the thought that somehow we needed them to govern and that they would be loyal to the president. And it was a huge miscalculation. Fast forward to the end of the administration, one of my absolute favorite people in the administration, Johnny McEntee, was the director of personnel, and Johnny knew exactly who should be in the administration and who shouldn't. And as long as the boss puts people like McEntee in charge of personnel decisions, he's certainly not going to make the same kind of mistakes. And he knows Mnuchin was a disaster as Treasury Secretary. He fired Mattis, he fired Tillerson. I think he understands that John Kelly was an abysmal failure as a chief of staff, and he understands, more importantly, the reasons why. The reasons why is these people didn't support MAGA, they didn't understand MAGA, and there's a funny section in the book, Cheryl, where Bob Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, who's kind of a amateur comedian, he's pretty funny sometimes. He basically would say to me after some of these meetings we'd have, there's two kinds of people in the Trump administration: those who think they have to save the world from Donald Trump, and those who think Trump can save the world. The Lighthizer and I were in the latter category. Mnuchin, Mattis, Kelly, just run on down the line. We're in the former, and Gary Cohn, good God, the Goldman Sachs guy, what a mistake that was. And they were constantly derailing, deterring, and disrupting the Trump agenda. And even though Trump was, in my judgment, the best president in modern history, particularly on the economy, what we did wasn't as fast as it could have, should have been, and at the end, it wasn't as tough. I mean, I think the worst thing that got away from me, where I lost the battle to the Neville Chamberlain and Lord Halifax of our time, I'm talking about Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and Larry Kudlow, the National Economic Council Director, was the executive order that the boss almost signed that would have held Communist China accountable for the financial costs and the origins of the virus.
Right.
And it was a critical miss, because the whole campaign against Trump that was waged by CNN and MSNBC and the Democrats was framed around blaming President Trump for the pandemic. Now, that was their campaign. That was it. And if we had been able to shift the blame from Communist China, from Trump to Communist China, where it rightly belonged, I think that would have made a very material difference. But the China doves inside the West Wing just kept saying, no, can't do that. Disrupt the skinny deal, can't do that. The stock market might react negatively, can't do that. And we played it safe, as it were. And I'd sit in the Oval Office and listen to these people and think, Jesus, these people are just stupid. They're politically naive. They're the smart. I think Obama. The only thing Obama and I ever said the same thing about it was like the dumbest smart guys we'd ever met. And that was some of these guys in the White House. Although you take a guy like Gary Cohn, who was the first National Economic Council director, he wasn't dumb. He was just against everything the president stood for. And he's cunning. He's not the brightest bulb on the planet, but he's cunning. And he uses his cunning to disrupt the president's agenda. And there's a great story in the book about how it finally ran him out on a rail. But boy, did he do some damage before that.
Let me finish with this one remark that I'd love your response to, because you are an expert in China policy, and the world under Joe Biden has dramatically shifted, mostly because he's a puppet for the far left forces, right? And so what's taking place in America is all this globalism that has been waiting for a weak president for so many decades. It's been able to infiltrate Americans' politics and policy and even free market. And so when Donald Trump runs again, which I hope he does, and I hope he wins, how is he going to combat these far leftist forces that are really doing business with China and trying to make China the greatest country in the world and America secondary? How do you respond to that? Especially look at China and Russia meeting now and being friendly.
I say it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but when you mean the far left people that are getting money from China, are you talking about Jared Kushner and Mnuchin?
Well, I'm talking about
those liberal Democrats. No, I'm just saying. The whole of Wall Street sucks from the teeth of China. Let's be clear about that.
Right.
This is the problem. And Mitch McConnell sucks from the teeth of China because he sucks from the teeth of Wall Street. I mean, this is the problem. And one of the beauties of Donald Trump when he ran for office is he didn't need their money, and so he could do the right thing. That's rare in politics. That's rare in politics. I mean, you can't trust a politician who raises money from the usual corporate suspect to do the right thing. They'll say the right thing, but whether they do the right thing is a totally different animal. And so you just got to get Trump in there and make sure that he is surrounded by people who are loyal to him, tough, smart, and competent, and will advance his agenda. And by the way, the learning curve, he's up the learning curve, right?
Yep.
First year was rocky. It's like he didn't understand quite how to most efficiently pull the levers of power. I mean, how could he? I mean, any president has the same problem. But boy, he gets it now, and the second term would be a rocket ship to prosperity as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that would be a great thing for America, because Joe Biden has been busily crippling all that Donald Trump did for America. So I would love to see him have a second term. Peter Navarro, Taking Back Trump's America: Why We Lost the White House and How We'll Win It Back. It's going to be a tremendous read. I know it. I want to thank you for being on Bold and Blunt and chatting with me.
Great to be with you, Cheryl. You take care.
Taking Back Trump's America, which is code for taking back America from the far leftists that have actively stolen it, first under Barack Obama, now again under Joe Biden. How many more Barack Obama, Joe Biden administrations do we need before we realize these Marxists, these communists that have infiltrated the Democrat Party do not represent what America stands for, do not care about American exceptionalism, and look at America as only a parcel of land to exploit for their own political globalist ambitions? Come on, voters of the country, unite, to coin a Marxist phrase. And let's indeed vote out the Marxist Democrats this November, laying the platform, laying the groundwork for a Trump return to the White House. Just think how the left will howl. If you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for faith-based podcasts. You can get Bold and Blunt at washingtontimes.com, as well as my newsletter that comes out 3 times a week at washingtontimes.com. Just go there, find my name, click on it, and there are some easy directions at the bottom of my commentaries where you can sign up for my Monday, Wednesday, Friday newsletter. It comes out in your email box in time for the lunch hour, along with my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts that come out Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I want to quickly mention that if you want a little bit more eye-opening understanding of how the leftists in government have exploited Americans' fear for political purposes, for selfish political gain, check out my latest book, Lockdown, The Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. It's available wherever books are sold and offered, and also at CherylChumley.com. Thank you again for listening. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.